here. They're all bigger than -7. Okay, next one. And again, I just want to remind you guys, I'm not going through this video to explain things. I'm going through this video to remind you of things. So I'm not really going in depth. I'm just kind of going quick. All right, so solving this like a regular inequality or equation. So it's 2 times x and 2 times 1. So I have 2x plus 2 is less than or equal to -13 minus 3x. I want to get my variables on one side and my numbers on the other side. So I'm going to add 3x here, get my variables on the left side. So I have 5x plus 2 less than or equal to -13. Okay, and then I want to get this 2 on the other side, so I want to get my numbers on the other side. So I'm isolating my variables. 5x less than or equal to, so I do the opposite, -2. So -13 minus 2 is -15. And then I'm going to divide by 5 on each side. And if you notice, as I go through all these, I say on each side, on each side. I'm going to do this to this side, and I'm going to do it to the other side. And those are those properties of equality that we talked about. So x less than or equal to -3. Okay, so there's my solved inequality. So x is less than or equal to -3. So I'm looking for -3, here it is. I'm going to put a closed dot because it's less than or equal to, it's got the equal to part on there. And then anything that is less than or equal to -3, I'm going to put an arrow pointing in that direction. Anything less than or equal to -3. Before I get off of inequalities, just remember that if you divide by a negative, then your sign changes direction. Okay. Compound inequalities. So this is for honors again. I'm just solving 2 inequalities at the same time. So there can be or there can be examples of and down here. So here's an or example where your inequalities are going to be pointing away from each other. So let's go ahead and just solve this one. So I have -x. I'm going to subtract 1 from each side. So I have is greater than or equal to 3. Divide by -1. Oh, here's an example. Divide by -1. So x is less than or equal to -3. So I switched the direction of the sign because I divided by -1. Okay, there's 1. Next, I'm going to add 1. So I have -2x is less than -16. And then I'm going to divide by -2. So x, and because I'm dividing by a negative, I'm changing the direction of the sign. X is either greater than 8 or x is less than or equal to -3. So x is less than or equal to -3. Here's -3, closed dot, because it's less than or equal to, and then pointing in this direction. That's this part. Now this part is x is greater than 8. So I need to find 8 on here, which is over here. It's greater than, so it's an open dot, and it's pointing in the direction of anything bigger than. And for it, on the other ones, I didn't do interval notation, so I need to remind you guys of that real quick. So this arrow is going to -infinity. So my interval notation is going from -infinity all the way to -3. And -3 is included, so I put a bracket. Union, +8, so that's not included. So I'm going to put an 8 like this, and with a parenthesis, all the way up to infinity, which is also not included or can't be touched. So I'm going to put another parenthesis. So, yeah, one more. Here's an and, which means they should be pointing toward each other. So the way you do this is you break it in 2 parts. So I'm going to have this part, -24, less than or equal to 2x minus 10. And I'm going to break it also into this part, the right side. 2x minus 10 is less than -6. And I'm going to solve both of those separately. So I'm going to add 10 to both sides on this one. So I have -14 less than or equal to 2x. Then I'm going to divide by 2. So -7 less than or equal to x. There's 1 solved. This one I'm going to add 10 to both sides. So I have 2x is less than 4. And then I'm going to divide by 2. X is less than 2. Okay, so now I'm going to graph both of these situations. So x is greater than or equal to negative 7. So here's negative 7. It's a closed dot because it's greater than or equal to. And I'm going in this direction until I get to x is less than 2. So here's x is less than 2. Here's 2. Coming this way, and you can see what an and looks like. So an and looks like they're pointing inward toward each other versus an or situation is pointing outward from each other. The interval notation on this is pretty much just that x goes from negative 7, and it's included, so it's a bracket, all the way up to positive 2, not included, so it's a parenthesis. All right. Absolute value. So again, isolate your absolute value. So in the same way with solving an absolute value equation, an inequality would just be changing the sign, but changing this to a positive and a negative, but also changing the direction of the sign. So you have 7x plus 7 is less than 35, or 7x plus 7 is greater than negative 35. Okay, so I'm going to subtract 7 from both sides. 7x is less than 42. Divide by 7, so x is less than 6. Or, solve this one, subtract 7 from both sides, so 7x is greater than negative 42. So x is greater than negative 6. I made a mistake right here, didn't I? So if that's a plus 7, I should have subtracted 7, which would have made this a 28. So 7 divided by, or 20, so let me just write over this. That should have been a 28. So divide by 7 on each side, so that should have been a 4. Okay, so x is less than 4, or x is greater than negative 6. So x is less than 4 would be an open dot going this way, and x is greater than 6 is a open dot going that way, and they meet in the middle, which means I should have been saying and. Okay, so my interval notation goes from negative 6 all the way up to positive 4. Both are non-inclusive, so I put parentheses. And then hopefully, I'm going to stop this video after this next problem. Okay, so one more, we're going to isolate my absolute value sign. So I'm going to add 7 to each side, so I have 2. X minus 4. Less than or equal to 8. I'm going to divide by 2, so I have x minus 4 less than or equal to 4. And now my absolute value is isolated, so I'm going to break this into 2 separate equations where I have x minus 4 is less than or equal to 4, and x minus 4 is greater than or equal to negative 4. So again, I make this negative, but I also need to change that sign. Okay, so let's solve these. X less than or equal to 8, and x is greater than or equal to 0. So these are both greater than, or these are the equal to, so it's going to be a closed dot at 0 and a closed dot at 8. Greater than 0, less than 8. They meet in the middle. Okay, interval notation is going from 0, including 0, so it's a bracket, all the way up to 8, and including 8. All right, I'm going to stop that video there, and then record these word problems on the other video.